Okay, this is on Pantheism and Panentheism, and my critique of that. Thou Art That posted a video a few weeks ago, and I'm just going to address some of the points. But mainly, I'm just going to be asking questions for other pantheists, and I think these are particularly difficult questions and criticisms. Not that they don't have answers, but I don't think any answer that could be given would satisfy me, at least none of the answers that I've heard so far. So, for those of you that are unfamiliar, pantheism is kind of the view that God is spread throughout the universe. That is, he's not over and above the universe in a kind of transcendental, looking down on us like big sky daddy theist kind of way, but it's that the properties are spread throughout the universe, or it's identical with the universe. It's another way of explaining it. God and the universe are identical, or they're necessarily coextensive, or all these fancy philosophical terminologies. But I have problems with this. The main problem, the main concern that I have is, why aren't you just atheists, pantheists? I think you're just expressing your atheism more poetically, but it's of no ontological significance whatever, so we should just get rid of it. Because, like, you know how Einstein said God does not play dice? Well, he wasn't necessarily invoking some theist sentiment here. Most people understand this. He was referring to God as the universe, and that's pretty much understood. But isn't it really confusing? This is my main concern. God is this entity, this all-powerful, creating, benevolent entity that the theists hold. He knows everything, he sees everything, he's everywhere, he's out of the universe, he exists in time, he exists out of time. All these kind of properties that the theists want to attribute him and call that entity God. It seems that you're stripping bare these entities and merely saying that God is the same as the physical universe. Why don't you just call it the universe? That's my problem. I mean, there's so many. I think it creates so much unnecessary confusion, calling it a form of theism, that it's completely irrelevant. Either that, or you could say, well, no, this God property is a necessary part of our ontology. We need it to do some of our work, and it needs to figure into our explanation somehow. Okay, so I'd like to know why. Secondly, let's assume that in this universe, in this possible world, which happens to be the actual world, we are living in a pantheist universe, and the pantheists are actually correct. I can conceive of another possible world in which this God property is not coextensive with the physical universe, and it looks to me like it would be indistinguishable from this one. So I think it's possible that there is another world, another possible world, in which there was not this property, and therefore it's not a necessary part of our explanation if we can have the world indistinguishable without this property. I think the pantheist would have to deny that that's possible, but he'd have to tell me why. He'd have to tell me what work this necessarily coextensive property is doing, and he'd also have to tell me why he thinks that property should be given the title of God, because I think that's confusing. I think it equates. It's just trying to be fancy about your atheism. I'm not trying to be harsh, but that's all I can see it doing so far. The second thing is Panentheism. This is a little bit stronger. I'm not going to look into it too much, but Panentheism is the idea that God is in the whole. I've looked at a little bit, but there is so much dispute within the actual philosophical literature that it's hard to know exactly what the consensus on this is. But it does seem to me that this God property in the panentheists' ontology is slightly over and above the whole, which is essentially theism. So all the traditional theist arguments that could be used to, all the traditional counter-arguments to theism could also be used to panentheism, so I'm not going to go into that in too much detail. But in short, I just want to know why pantheism isn't atheism, because it seems to me like the atheist and the pantheist would agree about 99% of everything, but the pantheist would say something. He would use God and say God is the universe. So it's an identity relation. God is the universe. Whereas the atheist would say God doesn't exist, there is a universe. But if God is the universe, why doesn't the pantheist simply drop the term God altogether and just use the term the universe? Because if it's the same thing, surely it would avoid confusion. Unless you can show me that this difference is more than semantic or a way of talking about things, then I don't think pantheism is one that we should accept, because it's superfluous. This God property being necessarily coextensive is a superfluous ontological entity, which could equally well be explained by a complete atheist point of view. So I think we should just drop it altogether. That's my sentiment. Peace.